Welcome to the second part of the doctoral examination of CanMed Joachim Thorkildsen, the doctoral defense at the Faculty of Medicine, University of Oslo. Present today is the candidate, the committee, and the audience. My name is Thomas Kipsgaard, and I will share this defense. On 8th of April 2021, Joachim Thorkildsen submitted the following thesis to the Faculty of Medicine, Oslo University. Chondrosarcoma in Norway, 1919 to 2013, risk stratification without histology, for evaluation of the degree of Philosophia Doctor. The dean appointed Professor Lee Jace, the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital of Birmingham, UK, senior consultant Mikael Skorpil from Karolinska University Hospital, Stockholm, Sweden, and Professor Kjersti Flatmark, Institute of Clinical Medicine at the University of Oslo. They evaluated the thesis, submitted a report to the faculty, and evaluated the doctoral examination. Following the recommendation of the committee, the dean found the candidate thesis worthy of defense of the degree of PhD at the University of Oslo. Earlier today, the candidate gave a trial lecture on the assigned subject, discussed diagnosis, imaging, treatment of pelvic bone tumors. And the trial lecture was passed. It was actually excellent. The candidate will now publicly defend the thesis. Professor Lee Jace will act as the first opponent, and the senior consultant Michael Skorpil will act as the second opponent. Anyone present at this public defense has the opportunity to oppose the thesis ex auditorio. At a notice of question or comments ex auditorio must be given to me before the first opponent has finished his opposition. After the second opponent had finished his opposition, the audience will also have the opportunity to ask some general questions. Usually we do this in a way that the first opponents finished, and then the second opponent comes after that. But today we're going to do it a little bit differently, because we're living in a strange world now, so we're going to do it a little bit differently. The committee asked me if we can start with the first opponent, then the second opponent will join, and then the first opponent will come in the end and through the last punches. So now I have to ask the candidate to take place up here and do the introductory presentation of his work.
Okay, so we have to get everything laptop høyre. That's us there, so we're going to have to pop that down and start here, and we have to go. Sorry, guys. All this talking. And we have to have a pointer that works this time. So that is... Why is that not working there? Yeah, but I have to do it on that screen. Okay, because I don't get to choose the laser here, obviously. Okay. And this one's working. Okay. Good afternoon. Dear committee, colleagues, family and friends, once again, thank you for your attention and the opportunity of presenting my PhD research entitled chondrosarcoma, or in Norway, 1990 to 2013, risk stratification without histology. I plan to use about 20 minutes of your time, so let's get on the way. We're first going to talk about some key concepts or premises of the project, as well as data gathering. Then I plan to summarize the main findings of Articles 1 through 3 before concluding. Why did that not follow suit? There we go. Okay, there's a few too many screens to follow here. I have been affiliated to the Norwegian Cancer Registry, now located just here. I've been affiliated with them since 2016, and it has a high standing internationally. The registry was established in 1952, and all those participating in the investigation or treatment of patients with cancer are obliged by law to report all cases to the registry. There is a unique quality control charter as part of the legislature, and this obligates and enables them to continually work for improved data quality, and that has been the basis of my projects. Now, orthopedic surgeons are often compared to Neanderthals by the medical community, but it is true that we like to hit things hard with a hammer, but nonetheless, we are capable of intellectual thought and have some clear ideas and concepts about our research. First of all, chondrosarcoma is many different diseases. It's defined by where in or on the bone it originates. So the most common form originates inside the bone marrow or the intramedullary cavity, and is therefore called central chondrosarcoma or central conventional chondrosarcoma. It can grow and enlarge and break through the cortical bone into what we call a soft tissue component. Although the microscopic picture looks similar for all of these diseases, each has different etiology, treatment, and behavior. Peripheral chondrosarcoma, on the other hand, grows on a benign bony outgrowth called an osteochondroma. This is different again from periosteal chondrosarcoma on the outside of the bone without an osteochondroma, and all of these can undergo a change into a much more aggressive form called dedifferentiated disease, again then to be specified whether it is dedifferentiated central, peripheral, and so on. So these subtypes are different diseases and must prognostically be studied individually. Point 2 is nicely illustrated by this curve from Van Praag and all from Holland. This is a common graph called a Kaplan-Meier graph. And in this case, it measures overall survival, so that is people dying from any reason in a national Dutch chondrosarcoma cohort. Now, as the lines dip from the top, more people are dying. The coloring depicts histological grade, an assessment of the tumor in the microscope aimed at telling us how aggressive it is. This has been the sole method by which we have categorized chondrosarcoma during the last 50 years. It looks appealing, 3 distinct lines. The green for the least aggressive, the red for the most aggressive, and the intermediate grade 2 between them. I have a bone to pick with this graph for 2 reasons. First of all, every patient in this cohort has risk. Being alive is a risky business. And if we plotted all of these observers in the room here today and followed them for 10 years, we would all be living on a line that falls. Living is a dangerous business. The second is an outcome variable, overall survival. It's also measuring heart disease, stroke, car accidents, and other cancer. It's the easiest outcome variable to use because there's very little debate as to whether someone is alive or dead, but it's open to influence from other parameters. We don't know if these patients are actually dying from their chondrosarcoma. There is another very important limitation to the graph that we just saw, and that is that histological grade, this microscopic evaluation, is prone to intra and inter-observer variation. So it means if you ask a pathologist to assess grade for the same tissue on 2 separate occasions, there is a chance that he or she will give different answers, and if you give a group of pathologists the same tissue, there's also a chance that they will give different answers for the same tissue. And this is also a problem for chondrosarcoma assessment by radiologists and clinicians, so we have to share the blame. In studying chondrosarcoma, it's my opinion that we should, for the sake of precision, use the events that most directly relate to the illness. That means we can summarize this in 2 questions. 1, what is the likelihood of this tumor coming back in the same place, that is local recurrence on the blue? And 2, what's the risk of this tumor turning up somewhere else, that is metastasizing? For chondrosarcoma, most frequently this is to the lungs. Then, as a consequence of this local recurrence or metastasis, what is the likelihood or risk of dying or surviving in the event of this happening? Our cohort was based on searching the cancer registry for chondrosarcoma over a 23-year period. We also searched the tumor databases of the 4 regional hospitals in Norway treating chondrosarcoma. We had 348 cases eligible. We performed pathological review on all those with missing data, unclear data, or those at risk of a wrongful diagnosis in some way. And we performed radiology review on all those with imaging available. This left us with 311 cases available for analysis of incidence. Some of them had too little tissue to give detailed information, 5, and so for prognostic analysis, we have 306 cases. Let's talk about paper 1. We found an overall chondrosarcoma incidence in the period of 2.85 per million per year, but with an increase during the study period, larger for women than for men, so that for both in the most modern period, the incidence was 3.5 per million per year. This was driven by an increase in the most common central chondrosarcoma subtype, which also increases with age. Looking at the incidence in the first and the last part of the study, we can see that the increase is largest for grade 2 disease, an important difference from other research groups who find an increase driven by grade 1 disease. Further, we can see that each chondrosarcoma subtype has its unique pattern of local recurrence, metastasis, and death. Importantly, this allows for significant tailoring of follow-up regimes in the future and improved information to patients. The statistical analysis is only as good as its model. I haven't asked to use this picture. We chose to look further at what drives local recurrence, metastasis, and death for the most common central subtype, including age, sex, location, size, histological grade, and the presence of a soft tissue component in a multivariate Cox model. So, what drives local recurrence? At a multivariable level, when all the other features are accounted for, the presence of a soft tissue component and male sex are both associated with a significantly increased risk of local recurrence. Look here at the p-value and also at the confidence interval, not including the digit 1.0. So, what drives the risk of metastasis? The key feature in my mind. Well, from our analysis, it is again the presence of a soft tissue and components, as well as malignancy grade 3, which is associated with risk of metastasis at a multivariate variable level. And in the end, which features are associated with increased risk of death or death from chondrosarcoma? Shall we say it together? The presence of a soft tissue component. That's right. In addition to being old, logically, and your chondrosarcoma having spread at the point of diagnosis. So for Article 2, our primary focus has been to study which features are associated with metastatic events, the strongest determinant of chondrosarcoma biology and outcome. Here only for the central chondrosarcoma cohort. First, we demonstrated that location matters. Any real estate agent could have told us this, of course. There are hardly any metastatic events in the blue line from the extremity-based tumors, and almost all occur from tumors in what we could term the axial skeleton. That is the pelvis, the spine, the thoracic cage, and the scapula. We then found inspiration in a constructed dilemma. Which of these two tumors is the most aggressive? A large intramedullary tumor with a small soft tissue component, or is it this tumor over here with a small intramedullary tumor but exploding into a huge, big soft tissue component? A leading question, perhaps. So to investigate further, we decided on a standardized mode of measurement of the size of the soft tissue component, here in the pelvis on the left and in the knee on the right. Having tried a number of ways of analyzing this, we tried whole digit intervals and found this. Remember, we're studying the risk of metastasis or spread of the tumor. The blue line is those tumors that are confined to inside the bone marrow, very flat, and that is no events or no metastasis. The red line is a little bit higher, but not to a significant degree. This is the tumors with a small soft tissue component, but those measuring less than a centimeter. The green line is for those tumors that have a soft tissue component of 1 centimeter or more, and we can see a significant association with metastatic events demonstrated again by the confidence interval. Combining tumors of the wrong page. Combining tumors of the axial skeleton with a large soft tissue components against the rest of the cohort, we get this curve. I wouldn't have expected to get this excited over a Kaplan-Meier curve, but my life has changed. We can see here that the majority of the cohort has a near flat blue line, meaning no or very few events, and the red line is clearly elevated with a high hazard ratio and a confidence interval not containing one and which is narrowed. We call the blue line for Oslo low risk and the red line for Oslo high risk. And this is the most important finding in our research. We have to get stuck into the statistics again, including margin for the analysis of local recurrence. We can see that indeed surgical margin, an R0 versus an R1, is the most important factor depicting risk of local recurrence. While Oslo risk is the only factor that independently predicts risk of metastasis and death from chondrosarcoma in this cohort. Note, while malignancy grade becomes insignificant. And voila, we have risk stratification without histology, giving a large low-risk group with 2% risk of metastasis and 10% risk of local recurrence, while the high-risk group is much smaller, but has 33% risk of metastasis and 21% risk of local recurrence. Nearly 80% of these patients have low risk, which is much more pleasant conversation to have in the clinic. The final article, Article 3, also concerns the central chondrosarcoma subtype, but this time we're addressing the pattern and impact of local recurrence in the cohort. It has been speculated that when chondrosarcoma recurs locally, this is associated with an increased risk of metastasis and often with the risk of a more aggressive tumor locally, a term called upgrading or dedifferentiation. Two different concepts. This has not been appropriately studied at a subtype level. Looking at the central chondrosarcoma cohort overall, there are 32 cases of a first local recurrence and 40 local recurrence events overall. Looking at the curve on the left, the blue line is the rate of metastasis for those without local recurrence, while the red is significantly elevated, depicting risk of metastasis for those with local recurrence. Likewise, to the right, the reference is survival, this time overall survival for those without local recurrence. The red line is dropping significantly lower from 100% to 25% for those with local recurrence. So overall, the whole group, local recurrence is associated with an increased risk of both metastasis and decreased survival. There have been many myths about chondrosarcoma behavior, which I think much of this myth is easily explained by the consequence of our tools for understanding them. When we analyze the impact of local recurrence in smaller selected groups, we can see a pretty clear trend. Features of low disease aggressiveness, like curettage patients, those without a soft tissue component, extremity location or grade 1 disease do not have increased risk of metastasis in the event of a local recurrence. But those that are more aggressive at the outset do have increased risk in the event of local recurrence. Because many of these features have significant overlap, the most useful distinction is the Oslo risk categories. There is a single metastatic event with local recurrence in Oslo low risk, while metastasis occurs in 6 of 8 in the high risk group. Although the p-value is not formally significant, the lack of events in one group, combined with the clustering of events in the other, and the tendency for significant implies that Oslo risk from primary diagnosis also predicts risk in the setting of a local recurrence. And now shortly for patterns. We found only a single case of upgrading and 2 cases of dedifferentiation. Mean time to local recurrence was 1.4 years, and mean time to metastasis thereafter was 1.7 years. Importantly, 44% of those with local recurrence achieve local control. So, is there any point of routine follow-up? Well, frankly, yes. Half of local recurrence are asymptomatic and discovered by imaging at routine follow-up. So it's time to wrap up. In conclusion, we found the incidence of chondrosarcoma in Norway was 2.85 per million per year, rising to 3.5 in the most modern period. There is an increase driven by an increase in the most common central chondrosarcoma subtype, more specifically grade 2 disease. Skeletal location combined with the size of the soft tissue component forms the basis of a risk stratification model without histology, giving a large low-risk group and a small high-risk group. This same risk model appears to predict risk of metastasis and death in the event of local recurrence. Thank you.